Can I ask Councillor Locker to move and Councillor McDermott to second the motion in their names?
Madam Mayor, may I move the motion?
And may I second the motion?
An amendment to the motion has also been circulated. Can I ask Councillors Rigby and Loveland to move and second their amendment?
Yeah, propose the amendment.
And I'm duly seconding.
Thank you. Councillor Locker.
The whips have agreed that Councillor Rigby will go first and then Councillor Locker, and then we'll call it a day.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carpenter. Councillor Rigby.
Okay. So this motion is.
I can't hear you. Councillor Rigby, I can't hear you.
Okay, I'll start again.
No, you're fine now. You're fine now. Thank you.
So this motion is quite a performance just to get an update on the A24 trial, given you had one last week with Peter Fletcher on the road itself. So this motion has lots to amend so that it accurately represents the situation. For example, anyone reading this would think that we've cracked the 20 mile an hour on all our roads, but we're not there yet. For example, we've left a big chunk of Bellevue Road at 30 miles an hour by mistake. Andrew Gilligan, the PM's travel advisor, was also left out of this motion, and he sits on the Active Travel Oversight Committee. And Mr Gilligan had pen in hand with this scheme and our Garrett Lane plan, which as it slowly progresses uses the same wands as the A24. So there appears to be some unfinished business between Mr Gilligan and Wandsworth Overcycling Division. TfL has received 1,500 items of correspondence on this scheme, similar numbers to other major consultations. For instance, CRF in Hackney in the Isle of Dogs was 2,200, CFR 3-phase 2,259, Tooting Town Centre 970. What does TfL do with this feedback? Well, each week a meeting is held with scheme sponsors, designers, engineers, network traffic managers to discuss the feedback, and it's followed up with a separate meeting to discuss actions that are being taken. Some councillors are pushing TfL to do what we did and give up at the first hurdle, but TfL continues to learn and improve, introducing new loading bays and parking bays, increasing the width between wands, allowing for vehicles to pull in and make space for emergency service vehicles, modifying traffic signals following monitoring of traffic and bus journey times, smoothing the humps at bus stop bypasses, and further changes are being looked at and designed. Sorry, what was that? What data is being used? Well, TfL is monitoring the impacts of scheme, including road collisions, cycle numbers, traffic and bus journey times, and accessibility for older and disabled people. These changes need to bed in to better understand the impacts and provide people with the data and monitoring. And then there'll be a review process to understand if the scheme is having its intended benefit. And if it's made permanent, there will be a statutory review. Sound familiar? It's how the LTN trials were supposed to run. What about disabled bays? TfL retained the majority of blue badge parking and moved it to red route returns in side roads. What about parking for shoppers? Well, this route had very limited parking as it's a red route, and let's not forget it was supposed to be an actual cycle lane for many hours of the day. But there were frequent incidents of people parking illegally in loading and disabled bays, and this created additional safety concerns for people cycling. What about the increased pollution? Well, unfortunately, like many of our roads, the air quality is not currently being monitored on CS7, but residents should have frequent access to information about the air we breathe. So what about the money that we were given by the government to bring forward transformative schemes to encourage more active travel? Well, we've learned tonight and we've heard that removing motor vehicles from high streets and pedestrianising space proved really good for business. But our LTN trials remain suspended in disbelief until November, even with residents submitting petitions to bring them back. Our own cycle lanes were due to be ready for back to school, but which year? Our own school streets are an utter shambles, head teachers writing in with reports of lives being put in danger, missing signs and barriers, volunteers standing in the rain and cold being abused by drivers, sharing high-vis clothing in the middle of a pandemic. What on earth happened to the £200,000 you received for school streets? So let's work with TfL, not try to score cheap political points. It's time to put your time and your energy using money from the Prime Minister that he gifted to us to make transformative change and start to scrutinise your own work.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. Councillor Lockley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I begin by thanking the thousands of residents and businesses who have been in touch with the Council and me as Cabinet Member for Transport in recent weeks to give their feedback. The response has been truly unprecedented, and I think some common themes can be identified. There is a broad consensus on the need for safer and healthier streets, and Transport for London's red route through Balham and Tooting, the A24, is clearly a priority for action with an unenviable record on safety. However, there are overwhelming concerns about the design and implementation of changes that TfL have introduced on the A24. So I hope that tonight we can come together and urge a rethink about their approach. Of course, we must do something to tackle the A24's worrying accident record. We want TfL to make the road safer for cyclists and all the users of CS7. And pedestrians. We mustn't forget that a number of the tragic accidents have involved people crossing this road, especially at the major crossroads, which TfL desperately need to address. There is a growing sense that the design and implementation of TfL's changes on this critical route is having unintended consequences and potentially making things worse. We know from the Council's own director-led review that emergency services like the police and the fire brigade have highlighted problems with access and response times. Springfield Hospital too, while supporting the aims of traffic calming measures, has highlighted the detrimental impact on patients and NHS staff. A typical comment in recent weeks goes like this: I'm concerned for the safety of people at bus stops, the difficulties for emergency vehicles, particularly ambulances going to and from St George's, the problems caused for local businesses and overall congestion. I suspect many of the councillors in the minority group would agree with this summary by their Labour colleague, Siobhan McDonough MP. So, how do we make things better? How do we deliver on those aims of improving safety on this busy and important road without the issues that we have seen in recent weeks? The first thing is to acknowledge the ongoing problems. The London Mayor himself said in a radio interview on the 18th of September that there have been problems with congestion on the A24, blocking emergency vehicles. Yes, TfL have now begun to increase the spacing between the cycle wands so that cars can pull in between them. That was something that Wandsworth Council transport officers urged them to do during the design stage, so I do welcome the fact that they are finally following that advice. As well as improving the design, it's vital that TfL engage with local communities and businesses. Let's urge TfL to do more to help local businesses in these difficult times. Surely the design can be more flexible, especially on issues like loading bays. The case of Minard Jewellers on Upper Tooting Road, which sells jewellery for South Asian weddings, is just one example of the specialised businesses in the area which attract customers from far further afield than just Wandsworth. They are very clear that TfL's changes are making it harder for them and for their customers. Critically, we need to respect local people's views. If these transport improvement schemes are to work, It is vital that we bring people with us. Behavioural change requires meaningful engagement, and if this means taking longer and implementing changes incrementally, so be it. Let's give practical consideration to what people need to help them change the way they travel. For example, Wandsworth Council has long lobbied for the extension of the Boris Bike schemes to Balham and Tooting, which is long overdue by TfL. In terms of the Labour Group's amendment, personally, I think we need to keep the wording and sense of urgency in the original text. TfL needs to address the A24 problems as a priority. Local people and businesses deserve answers to their questions now, not in 18 months' time. So I ask colleagues to support the motion unamended. Madam Mayor, this council has listened to the residents and businesses of Balham and Tooting. Now it's Sadiq Khan's turn to do the same. Thank you.
Councillor Cook, is the amendment agreed?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, the amendment is not agreed.
Is there any dissent or abstention from the Conservative group on the voting indicated by Councillor Cook? Councillor Carpenter, is the amendment agreed by your group?
We're in favour of our amendment, yes.
Is there any dissent or abstention from the Labour group on the voting indicated by Councillor Carpenter? Councillor Grimston, how do you wish to vote?
I'm against the amendment.
Thank you. So the amendment is not carried. So can I put the motion to be voted by asking Councillor Cook, is the motion agreed?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the motion is agreed.
Is there any dissent or abstention from the Conservative group on the voting indicated by Councillor Cook? Councillor Carpenter, is the motion agreed?
So,
Councillor Carpenter, is the motion agreed?
We're against the motion.
You're against the motion. Is there any dissent or abstention from the Labour group on the voting indicated by Councillor Carpenter? Councillor Grimston, how do you wish to vote?
I'm in favour of the motion.
Thank you. So therefore the motion is carried. Now we're not going to consider the motion.
Madam Mayor,
Councillor Cook. Yes.